The silence in my little apartment is the loudest thing I've ever known. It's been 3 weeks since David left. Every corner holds a memory of him. His laugh echoing from the kitchen, the way he'd hum off key while reading. On the sofa, the son of his worn t-shirt I still sleep with. He was my world, my whole entire world, for 10 bright, beautiful, secret years. My family never knew about David. Not really. Not the truth of him, of us. We met in a way that feels like a storybook now. I was struggling with a flat tire on a rainy Tuesday, late for work, tears welling up. And there he was, this tall man with the kindest eyes I'd ever seen, pulling over. He didn't just change the tire. He made me laugh through my frustration. He was calm, gentle, and had a smile that could melt glaciers. That was David. He was black. I'm white. And in the small town I grew up in, with my very traditional, very white family, that was a chasm wider than any ocean. When David and I started dating, it was easy to keep it to myself. It was new, precious. But as weeks turned into months, and I fell deeper in love than I ever thought possible, a knot of fear started to tighten in my stomach. I knew my parents. I knew my older brother, Tom. They weren't bad people, not hateful, but they had expectations. Ideas about how life should be, who belonged with whom. I'd heard the casual remarks over the years, the subtle discomfort around anyone who didn't look or think exactly like them. I told myself I was protecting David, protecting us. I didn't want their judgment, their awkward questions, their potential disapproval to tarnish the beautiful thing we had. So I built a wall. David was my wonderful boyfriend, then my amazing fiancé, then my beloved husband, but to my family, he was just vaguely David, a friend I sometimes mentioned, the details always fuzzy. We eloped. A tiny ceremony on a beach, just us and 2 witnesses we found at a nearby cafe. It was perfect. We exchanged simple vows, our hearts so full. That night, holding his hand, I promised myself I'd tell them. Soon. But soon never came. The fear was too strong. The thought of their faces, the potential disappointment, the arguments. I couldn't bear it. David understood, or at least he said he did. He never pressured me. He just loved me completely and without reservation. Whenever you're ready, my love, he'd say. His voice a comforting balm. So we lived our life in a bubble of our own making. Holidays were a juggling act. I'd spend Christmas Eve with David, full of warmth and our own traditions, then drive to my parents on Christmas Day, alone, a carefully constructed story about David having to work or visit his own family, who, by the way, knew and adored me. It was exhausting. The guilt ate at me sometimes, a dull ache. But then I'd look at David, see the love in his eyes, and I'd tell myself it was worth it. Then he got sick. It was fast, brutal. One minute he was complaining of a persistent cough. The next we were in a sterile hospital room, doctors speaking in hushed, serious tones. The world tilted. Nothing mattered but him. I barely left his side. I held his hand, just like I did on our wedding day, and whispered all the things I should have shouted from the rooftops. The last day, I knew. He was tired. So tired. He looked at me, his eyes still full of that incredible kindness, and whispered, "Tell them, Sarah. Let them know who I was, who we were. It's okay." And then he was gone. The pain was a physical thing, crushing me. But through the haze of grief, his last words echoed. "Tell them." A week later, after the small service I'd arranged with his few remaining relatives and our close friends, I drove to my parents' house. The house I grew up in, the one that always felt safe, now felt like a courtroom. Mom opened the door, her face etched with concern. "Sarah, honey, you look terrible. We've been so worried. You've been so distant. I walked into the familiar living room. Dad was in his usual armchair, newspaper lowered. My brother, Tom, was there too, visiting for the weekend. They all looked at me, waiting. My hands were shaking. I sat on the edge of the sofa. I need to tell you something, I began, my voice barely a whisper. It's about David. David? Your friend? Mom asked, a little confused. I took a deep breath. David passed away last week. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dad sat up straighter. Tom looked shocked. Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry, Mom said, her voice thick with sympathy. We didn't even know he was ill. You should have told us. And there it was. The opening, the chasm I had to leap. He was more than my friend, Mom, I said, tears starting to stream down my face. David was my husband. We were married for 10 years. Silence, a thick, heavy silence that pressed down on me. Mom's eyes widened, unblinking. Dad's face was unreadable, frozen. Tom just stared. Married? Dad finally rumbled, his voice low and dangerous. You were married and you never told us? We eloped, I choked out. It was complicated. Complicated? Tom scoffed. What's so complicated about telling your family you got married, Sarah? I looked from one to the other, their faces a mixture of confusion and hurt, anger starting to brew. This was it. David? I hesitated, my heart pounding. David was black. If the silence was heavy before, it was suffocating now. Mom sank back into her chair, her face pale. Dad's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching. Tom looked like I'd slapped him. Black? Mom whispered, as if the word itself was foreign, unbelievable. Yes, I said, a little stronger now, a wave of defensiveness for David washing over me. He was the kindest, most wonderful man I've ever known. He loved me, and I loved him more than anything. Dad stood up, his face flushing a deep red. So, you were ashamed? He bit out. Ashamed of him? Ashamed of us? Is that why you hid him away like some dirty secret? No, I cried, the injustice of it stinging. I wasn't ashamed of him. I was afraid of how you would react. Afraid you wouldn't accept him, wouldn't accept us. So you lied to us for 10 years? Mom's voice was trembling, tears now rolling down her own cheeks. All those Christmases, birthdays, all that time you had a husband. A whole life we knew nothing about. The hurt in her voice was a knife in my own heart. I wanted to tell you so many times, I pleaded, but I couldn't. I was scared of losing you or of him being hurt by your judgment. Tom finally spoke, his voice quiet but cutting. So, you thought so little of us, Sarah. You thought we were those kinds of people, and that was it. The truth of it, from their side. My fear had painted them with a brush they didn't know they held, and my silence had confirmed it for them. My mother started to sob then, not loud, angry sobs, but quiet, broken ones. A black man, she repeated, not with disgust, but with a kind of dawning, horrified understanding. We never knew. We never got to know your husband, and now he's gone. Dad just stood there, the anger seeming to drain out of him, replaced by something that looked like devastation. He looked older suddenly, smaller. He sank back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. It wasn't the explosion I had feared for a decade. It was worse. It was a shattering. They weren't just angry at my deception. They were broken by the realization of what they'd missed, of who they might have been in my eyes, and perhaps in their own. They were mourning a man they never knew, and the daughter they thought they had. The days that followed were raw. They asked questions, haltingly at first. They wanted to see pictures. I showed them our wedding photo, David's arm around me, both of us beaming. Mom traced his face with a trembling finger. He had kind eyes, she whispered, echoing my own first thought of him. Dad was quieter, but he'd look at the photos for long periods. One evening, he just said, "He sounds like he was a good man, Sarah. I wish we could have met him." That wish was the most painful and hopeful thing I'd heard. The secret was out. David's final goodbye hadn't just broken me. It had broken them too in a different way. It had broken open a space where truth, however painful, could finally enter. The healing will be long. Maybe some parts of our family will never be quite the same. But as I sit here in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by David's presence, I know I fulfilled his last wish. And maybe, just maybe, this breaking is the first step towards putting ourselves, all of us, back together a little more honestly this time.